All right, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Game Changers Show. I'm your host, Mike McKay, based in the Jacksonville, Florida market. And each and every week, we do this show with people who are changing the game of real estate all over the country. And this is a live show. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments for our guests to answer. For anyone in the Jacksonville market, if you want to reach out to us for any help or if you're thinking about getting into the market, and we are still a very active buyer in Jacksonville, so feel free to send deals our way as well. Um, so this week on the show, we've got Hunter Altman. So Hunter, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Been looking forward to this for over a month now, so excited to finally be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on. For the people who don't know you, could you give a little bit of kind of how you got into the real estate business and kind of how that's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Probably very similar to a lot of people. Um, Bought my first house out of college and kept it as a rental property. And I actually, in that first purchase, I met who is now my first and still long-term mentor, Nancy Weil. So I went to the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs, and she was my boxing coach, his wife, and she was an agent. And um, we walked probably 20, 30 properties, and she found this dud. I mean, it was a foreclosure. And she's sitting here telling me when we walk in and it smelled bad, we walk in and she's like, Hunter, this is the one. She's like, this is the one you're going to buy. And I was like, Nancy, we saw all these other nice houses. Why can't we just get one that's move in ready? And really glad I got that one. I could talk about that property. That's probably been my best deal just because it was the first. And, over time with the equity, I refinanced it twice to buy two other properties. And I got a HELOC on it now that I've used several times. So that's how I kind of stumbled into it.
Hmm. Gotcha. And then from there, your first property, right? Like, how long did it take you to pick up your next one?
Um, I didn't. Well, so my next one was another um, personal purchase. I used FHA financing, and it was in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and it was considered multi-family use. So it was a duplex that I converted to a triplex. I lived in every single one of the units and kind of lived and flipped.
Hmm.
And then after that, when I started cash flowing and things were going well with the property in Colorado, which it was my first purchase, um, I I started to get back into it. Right, you start to see cash flow, and you're like, man, this is house hacking. Let's do a little bit more of this, and so from that point, I actually met up with a buddy of mine, also in the Air Force. He came down to Cape Canaveral. It's close to Cocoa Beach, and he had been doing some real estate, and from that point, we became partners.
Hmm. And then where'd things kind of go from there once you guys partnered up?
So we picked up a few turnkey properties, and they were just rental properties, and we still have a couple of those. One, um, a couple years later, we ended up refinancing it and selling it owner finance.
Hmm.
Um, and that one's now sitting there cash flowing, and we got some equity that once that buyer refinances, we'll pull some equity out of it. And then we've got another couple rental properties as well. And he's he's more of a mastermind than I am, and he's very savvy. We haven't been active in doing deals together recently, but he's definitely a partner I'll have long term.
Cool. And you and I were talking a little bit offline. You said something that you just mentioned a little bit before, something about how you use a land trust when you're buying a sub two deal so you can refinance at any point. And I had actually never heard of that, and I'm sure a lot of the audience hasn't either. Could you talk a little bit about how that strategy works?
Yeah, so it is so in the world we're in, you hear a lot of like the Pace Morby kind of coaching, buying subject to, and a lot of people will buy subject to, um, and sell owner finance, or some people turn those subject to properties into rental properties. It's a super creative way and to buy with little money out of pocket, control a property and then create equity and cash flow spreads, and in some cases get a big enough down payment where it covers what you paid to get that property. Um, Somewhere along the way, I met a very smart man by the name of Jeff Hatcher, who was a trustee, and he explained kind of the risk of due on sale clause.
Mm.
And I'm sure most people that have been in real estate at least a year plus are familiar or have owned a house or familiar with, accelerating a mortgage or the bank or lender's ability to do that if they find out that a property was sold, without uh, their with basically sold subject to. The loan stays in someone's name and it moves into the title of the property moves to someone else. And so the way I execute that whole creative financing, buying subject to by and what I mean by that is keeping the mortgage in place from that original seller,
Mm-hmm.
and then selling it owner finance is uh, we have the seller. So we'll just like any other deal, you have a purchase agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And we use a little bit different lingo just to avoid purchase and sale. Um, but we'll have an agreement where that seller deeds the property into a land trust, and so that land trust would be 123 Main Street Trust, and it's technically their trust. So they deed the property into a trust, and then they assign beneficial interest to us upon giving them their, call it, walkaway money. So now they remain partisan, the trust. We have control of it via the trust. And then we have, the ability to keep it as a rental property or sell it owner finance or with financing by way of a promissory note, which is very, I mean, it's very common. What it also allows is for us to stay out of um, using mortgages, right? So we're staying away from mortgage and servicing and all this to avoid, um, mortgage law. So
Mm.
one of the reasons we also use the land trust is because when you take real property and deed it into a trust, it becomes personal property. So now, rather than mortgaging a home to the buyer, you are now loaning it almost as if it's a car loan. So I know it sounds a little bit squirrely there, but and to be honest with you, trust and the trustees there's so many different uses and benefits for it, um, but it can be complex. It can be very complex to understand.
So that allows you to, I don't want to use the word foreclose because it's not a mortgage, but if the person doesn't pay, it allows an easier, faster way to take the property back or.
Yeah. So uh, there's a few different sections of the trust agreement. One of them is the promissory note that I mentioned. So,
Mhm.
okay, here's your terms. You 360 months, just like any other loan,
Mhm.
but it's not a mortgage, right?
Mm.
So 360, let's say 8.99% interest, and here's your monthly payment, and here's the down payment, whatever. And then there's a possessory agreement, and so the possessory agreement is essentially um, a lease, and if you've heard of like uh, a purchase, what is it? A lease purchase. It's
Mhm.
not a lease option. It's like a lease purchase where you're kind of doing both simultaneously. You're renting and you're owning. You're bringing a down payment. It's very similar to that concept where you have ownership, you have beneficial interest. If you give a down payment, you have what we call a refundable contribution, which is your down payment, and then you have possession of the property, kind of like a lease, and you have possession and you're leasing the property up until the point that you fulfill the promissory note. Once that
Mm.
promissory note is fulfilled, you can they can leave it in trust, or they can refinance it and take it out of trust. It's now theirs, and they have fulfilled their contract. Up until that point, we treat it like a lease, and so if payments stop being made, this is better for both us and the tenant. By the way, we call them tenants. Uh, we can bring that to um, obviously an eviction rather than a foreclosure, which is a way quicker, easier, simpler process and way better for the tenant as well. Uh, Eviction over foreclosure.
And it's better for them because it doesn't end up on their credit record or because of some other reason.
Uh, it will wind up on their credit, but it's
Okay.
just in a less severe way.
Got it. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And then what's the part about you said like you can refinance? You mentioned something about being able to refinance it during that period. Maybe
yep.
talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the cool thing about the trust is that multiple parties can be beneficiaries at the same time. So seller deeds the property into trust; they remain beneficial interest for none of the benefit, right? So they remain. What we do is 10%, um, so that if ever a lender says, "Hey, we're going to call this due," we'll say no, and we keep good relationships with the sellers, so and they're fully aware of what we're doing, and we record all closings, and so and so technically and this is per like federal law. A lender can't accelerate the due on sale, or execute the due on sale as a result of the seller, the original guarantor of the loan.
Hmm.
So we keep them, we're beneficial interest, and then we remain beneficiary until that promissory note is fulfilled by the buyer. So as a result, and again, we're very vocal with the buyer, and very transparent that um, we can maintain access to the property for inspections, and for the purpose of refinancing, or putting different financing on. And the way we explain it is, how loans move from servicer to servicer. Um, uh, we may, and we tell them that we have underlying financing on each of the properties if we do, and then that at any time, once or twice a year, it depends on what kind of property, where it's at, or um, if we expect to refinance in a certain period of time. We get access to the property with, say, an appraiser, a bank appraiser,
Hmm.
um, and that allows us to be able to refinance because we still remain beneficial interest and a beneficiary, actually the majority beneficiary in the trust.
So if the bank, the original bank that is, from the seller that you bought or maybe it's not bought. I'm using the wrong terminology, but if who you got the property essentially subject to from, right?
Mhm.
If the bank were to call the due on sale clause, they can then show to the bank, no, you can't do that because um, I have a beneficial interest in this trust. Is that kind of the safeguard there, or
Yeah, the safeguard. So, kind of.
okay,
So I can't remember the federal law. It's not Dodd Frank. It's well, I'm sure I'll think of it along the way. But
sure,
I've actually researched this. But um, there are several instances where a lender cannot call a note due. One is if title is transferred by the seller or by an owner, and therefore the mortgage holder, lien holder, not the lien holder, the mortgage, or I'm getting these
yeah,
confused.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so by the guarantor of the mortgage, if they deed a property, and title transfers from their personal name to a land trust, um, that is one reason why a lender cannot call a note due. Now, inside the trust, a lender will not know, it's a private document, so the lender will not
yeah.
know who is parties in the trust. However, if they were to ever call it due, and honestly, um, the reason why the creative financing thing works is, and a lot of people do contract for deeds, and they take title, in their business names. if you never miss a payment, you're probably never going to get a loan called, right?
Hmm.
There's probably never going to be, they're never even going to know that title transferred. However, the reason we do that is this is to protect the person selling it to us, ourselves, and then whoever buys the property from us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's a scenario when you would refinance it?
Um, so I don't always buy subject to.
Hmm.
I've flipped a number of properties, and when I'm done with a flip, I'll list them MLS and I'll offer financing. So in that case, if someone wants to buy, they got, want to put 10 to 20% down. I used a construction loan
Hmm.
to finance the flip, the rehab, and now I got another 6 months on that construction loan, but I just sold the property owner finance. Then at the end of that construction loan, let's say it was a year, sometimes I do 2 years. At the end of that term, uh, that loan is due to my lender,
Hmm.
and I'm in that scenario in one property right now where I think September of next year I'll need to flush out that debt because it's a construction loan or it might be a bridge, so bridge financing,
Sure.
and and then I'll put longer term financing on. And the reason I did that for this one was because interest rates are so high. I'm waiting out maybe a potential, at least decrease in interest rates so that when I do refinance, it'll be for the long term and hopefully my payment will be, um, and I could also take out equity too.
Sure.
So for an example there would be, um, I have a property I did buy subject to, and the loan is super mature. I sold the property, and there's a huge equity spread there. The property's worth you know double what it was, and now I refinance it. I take a bit of my equity out and replace um, the original sub two lender just to get equity, and as long as it still cash flows for me, I'll be in good shape.
Yeah. Got it. So you're are y- what's the reason that if you bought something with a construction loan that when you sold it you would go this route offering owner finance instead of just kind of staying bring your own financing like a lot of flippers do? Yeah, we'll take FHA, VA, whatever, but bring your own finance.
I'll tell you two reasons. Um, three. Number one, if you just bring it to MLS, have someone buy it to the traditional route, um, then the profit I make will probably be a short-term capital gain, and so I'll pay a significant amount of tax on that
Hmm.
on that gain. So uh, at least 20 to
Yeah.
30%, if not more. Um, and and also, sorry, I just had a call coming in. Um, to create equity and sorry, calling again. Let me put this on airplane mode. Um, to create equity and cash flow spreads.
Okay.
Um, so when I list MLS and offer owner financing, um, it gives you a little bit of power, I think, to say, well, there's really no negotiation here. This is the list price. You need to bring 10 to 20% down or whatever. There might be a minimum. I might accept a 15K minimum,
Hmm.
depending on my outlays and my financial situation. And um, so there's no negotiation. And in some cases, I have inflated the price of the property by 2 to 3%. So you can get a premium for the sale price of the property. You can get a premium on the interest rate because the way I tell everyone is I'm not a lender. I'm not a mortgage company. And there's a lot more risk in this transaction than if I were to just sell it to you where you bring your own financing, you bring your own lender. And so if interest rates are 8.25, 8.5%, then I can charge 9.99% as long as the payment makes sense for them. So
Hmm.
now, um, so now I have a an underlying mortgage that's, let's say, 200,000, and I'm paying 8% on a $200,000 mortgage over 360 years. And now they purchased the property for 300K, gave me 40K down, and now their loan is 260 on a 9.99% interest. So
Yeah.
now I have a spread of equity between the 260 and 200, so that's 60K equity spread. And then I have a cash flow spread, so now it becomes a passive asset for me, right? So now I'm cash
Ah,
flowing between the overarching and the underlying mortgage.
gotcha. Yeah, that's really interesting. And then are you finding that the people that you're getting to buy it, they just don't qualify for normal financing because of some reason? I know a lot of people who do the sub two wrap thing talk about I get people who have cash businesses or whatever. So is that the similar clientele with you listing on the MLS, or is it a little different?
Yes, it is. There's a huge market for buyers that have the cash
Mhm.
but don't have the credit, or they were caught up in a situation that was out of their control that influenced their credit, and as a result, some of these people have really good jobs and they have family money, they have cash to put down. So I don't discriminate credit. Um,
Mm,
if they can bring a significant chunk to closing, and then they can show me that they have employment. It's kind of like the way I underwrite is I kind of just give them a lease application,
sure.
and just say, hey, can you prove that you make, two and a half, three times what the total payment will be,
Hmm.
and bring 10 to 20% down. We have a deal.
Yeah,
And I do discriminate some criminal history as well. I, I I say discriminate, and that, like, a lot of times people don't like that word.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I'm not going to judge. I just um, I tend to, I haven't even seen it, but I tend to think if you've been a criminal in the past, sometimes I try to shy away from um, risks
sure.
risks and anyone that would be considered medium to high risk.
Yeah. And then like, are you able to find a lot of lenders on your side when you refinance that will loan to a loan trust? Do you have to go to specific lenders, or is everyone kind of open to it?
It is That's a great question because it's difficult to do by keeping it in trust.
Hmm.
Um, but there are, so I have a myriad of lenders that I've used, and once you have a relationship with one, and they you can fully understand, they can fully understand what you're doing and how you're doing it. Um, and then you can pass that through them to their underwriters. It makes it a lot easier. There's been some cases where we've had to pull it out of trust in order to refinance, and I'll be honest, I've probably only refinanced twice of all the deals I've done. It's not
Yeah,
very common. I would need to do that.
right. And I guess if you are doing that, then you're not taking the sub two risk because you're refinancing anyway. So I guess it's kind of okay to take it out of trust for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Normally, if I have the property subject to, I'm not going to refinance because the terms of the underlying mortgage are better than current interest rates, way better. A lot of cases, less than 4%.
Hmm.
So, um, so yeah, I probably wouldn't flush out higher interest money in a more mature loan, because that would impair the the cash flow spread.
Sure. And then how do you explain this to the realtor who is representing the buyer? I could see that being a potential challenge.
Um, Short answer is I don't.
Hmm.
Um, the way I tell them is, so you mean the buyer's agent?
The buyer's agent, like, is like, it's not, you're transferring the interest in the land trust, right? Versus traditional sale, they may not understand what that is. Or maybe I'm
Yeah.
making. making up problems, but
No, that's good. So I guess it's kind of twofold. So on the sales side, normally I'm dealing directly with the seller.
mhm,
So the way I explain it to the seller is, um, I try to avoid explaining altogether, um, all the intricacies of the trust.
yeah,
I tell them that what I'm agreeing to, and in a lot of cases, this is a foreclosure situation. So anything for them, if they walk away with some cash in pocket and not have to be foreclosed on, then it depends on the motivation's always different. But basically, you're just telling them, hey, you're going to get your cash. We close a very specific way, and that way is we have you deed the property into trust, and then within that trust, you're selling your beneficial interest to us. And once it's in trust, and we've given you the amount of cash or the walkaway money that you've agreed to, then you have no more benefit and you have no more responsibility because we get power of attorney to act on their behalf inside that trust. Now on the sales side, dealing with a buyer's agent, which is more common,
mhm,
um, than a seller's agent. I have worked with a seller's agent though too. Um, the buyer's agent basically how I explain it to them is, this now that we're not selling MLS and they need financing, we don't take the on market MLS, using your South Carolina purchase agreement route. We'll use, our acquisition agreements. We'll use our trust documents, and all of that will be between me and your buyer. So I will need direct contact with your buyer, and we'll maintain your fee through that. Call it that discussion.
got it. So it gets listed, but then it gets kind of delisted when they choose to go the seller finance route, so that you don't have to use those, um, whatever the standard contract is, realtor contract in North
Yep.
Carolina. Yeah, or
Yep.
South Carolina. Yeah,
Exactly.
got it.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah.
Huh.
So if it'll stay on market until we have our agreement signed, but my agreement is way different than the standard, um, you know standard form uh, for brokerages or
Yeah.
states. Um,
At,
so
at this point, I mean, I've obviously kind of done it a bunch of times. Do you still get any pushback, or because have you just gotten so good at explaining it that it's like, oh, okay, like that's from the buyer's agent? I mean,
the only time I get pushback um, is when, so it's very common for a seller to pay both buyer and seller agent commissions. So the only time I've had pushback is when I said, hey, another benefit, right? When I said power, I don't mean it like I'm powerful, but you have negotiation power. And so what I tell them is, because I am financing it and I am not represented by an agent, that your buyer is responsible for your fee, and that's a negotiation that you guys can work out yourselves. And so some of them aren't comfortable with that because it's just like an expectation that the
yeah,
seller pays buyer and seller agent commissions, just because it's become a common formality. But I'll throw that into MLS sales all the time. Like, hey, well, yeah, we'll do this, but why don't you have um, your buyer pay your agent your commissions? And then they'll be like, no, no, no. A lot of people push back on that just because uh, it's become almost as if you can't negotiate that.
yeah, it's become I mean, you hear the saying, right? Oh, we represent you for free if you're a buyer, right?
Yeah,
I've heard that a lot
yeah,
of times.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that's what they you know that's what they probably pitch to their buyers a lot of times.
yeah.
So
Super interesting strategy. So, how often do you end up selling a flip that way versus selling it traditional financing?
well, I'm only probably a year into my own business, like my own personal, like myself. right? So, and it was a team of three, and now it's a team of two. I'm back down to me and my executive assistant, Camille, and so I would say it just depends on where I'm at from a capital perspective.
Hmm.
Um, and right now, I had been earlier this year. I had been in just a huge season of acquisitions, and so you acquire, you acquire, you acquire, you outlay, you outlay, you outlay. You have all these, you have all these funds um, out for, I think at some point it was nearly 10 flips that I'm just like continuing. The bank accounts start to
Yeah.
drain. You're like, what the heck's going on? And I also use private funds, which is, a huge help. And I'm starting to grow my investor pool, which is fun too, right? Because a lot of it is like friends and family, people I get through socials or whatever, 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation. Um, and, and so, uh, right now I'm in a season of just selling MLS, trying to get, just get some capital back in the business.
Hmm.
So acquiring 1 to 2 a month, one to two properties a month, and then right now I'm selling. I'm under contract to sell like four right now,
Okay. Nice.
and now that I have another two listed with another two coming up in the next couple weeks. One of those, now that I have four under contract, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna probably refinance and turn that one into a rental,
Yeah.
or consider owner financing it and creating that equity and cash flow spread.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of capital and what how tapped I am on the private and personal funds.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, right? That's a topic that, we raise some private money too. We've done some of it, right? Not a huge amount, right? So we are actually ramping that up a bit to bring in a couple new private lenders. But I'm curious how you have gone about sourcing your private lenders and how you structure everything with them, if you're open to sharing it.
Yeah, for sure. The main way, so you can definitely market for private lenders. Um, Free marketing is social media. So uh, I have everything on Instagram, and Camille, my assistant, does all this. Um, she posts on both my personal and my professional page. Um, and so most of the private lenders that I have are, I'm just, we're constantly posting our acquisitions, progress on each of the each of the flips. Um, we post when we have listings about to hit market, we post updates on what listings are under contract, and which ones are still active, which ones are like coming soon, and then we also post investment opportunities.
Mm,
So uh, I do offer both, bringing full amount of capital to fund flips. And I also offer second position funding. So I'm using, one of my lenders. I only have to bring 10% down. They'll fund 100% of the construction costs. So all I need is like the 10% down payment, carry cost, and then like fronting rehab funds to the contractor.
hmm.
So, um, and then that's it. That's it. I'll put it out on the socials, and people will just reach out with interest. I haven't, like, kind of like you, I haven't really focused on it.
Yeah.
It hasn't been like something I've needed to do, and I've kind of done a little bit more organically. And I feel like if I just keep posting on Instagram and on Facebook and getting more, just kind of growing that network a little bit more and more, then that will start to grow over time. And you get a first time investor, and then they want to put their money back to work again, and then again, and then again. And so it's almost, I guess I'd liken it to um, someone that's brokering, a financial advisor for, the stock market, where they have their book of business and they're talking about, oh, my book of business is, $10 million or whatever. And that's that's the amount of money that they're managing on behalf of their investors. It's the same
Hmm.
sort of thing. I think that book of business will grow organically over time the more I continue to do. And I get excited about it. So like we try to put some things out that are pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Hadn't we have for the first time doing two new builds, and so
Cool.
we bought a house that was a tear down. I posted about this a couple days ago. We bought a house that was a tear down, and we tore it down, and that was cool, right? Because you're
Yeah.
this 1910 house, you just leveled it to the ground. We're subdividing the lot into two lots, and we're building two completely different houses on this 1.73 acre lot that is now going to be, whatever half of that is, um,
Hmm.
and do two new builds, and so that's something that you know new to us, exciting for us, and we're just putting that content out there, and I have already I put out a post about an investment opportunity, and it's like fund me, and here's like the new build, and you can scroll to the right and see all the pictures of the plans and what we plan to do, and bed and bath, 3 bed 2 bath, 1599 square feet, Piedmont, South Carolina. And so we just try to put a little energy behind it, and make it exciting for someone to invest in something like that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've noticed the same thing, just posting on social media, and then sometimes I'll just
yeah.
mention it to friends, and they're like, "How do you get the money to buy all these flips?" I'm like, "Oh, I just borrow money from people and pay them 10%." And they're like, "Wait, you'll pay me 10% if I loan you money?" I'm like, "Yeah, you want to do it? How much money?" And they're like, "Yeah." So I mean, it's slow. It's like, just like not. I'm not saying that happens every day, but yeah, we've noticed
Yeah,
it just posting projects and stuff. You get a lot of
yeah.
people interested. So.
Do you always just curious, do you offer equity, or, do you partner with people to do yours?
Um, we will JV on flips with people sometimes if like
Okay.
if it's like so for example, like I don't like to take on stuff with major structural issues, but I have a
Hmm.
friend in town who will, and he doesn't mind doing it. So if I get a deal like that and it doesn't really make sense to wholesale it because there's a limited buyer pool for that kind of stuff, but there's like a big margin, right? Because it's a really problem, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking like 6 foot wide hole in the roof raining inside the house type thing, right?
Right.
I don't
Right.
want to do that kind of rehab. It's just not something we're going to do. So in that
Mhm.
sense, yeah, I'll go partner with someone on that, but that's more of just like a mutually beneficial partnership because of the construction side of it. Um,
Right.
Sometimes that person may fund the deal too, right? But I guess we
Yeah.
do those. But in terms of like just if we need money for flips, we'd rather just, at least for us, we tend to borrow it.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I'm like, in my mind, sometimes I'm like, well, how can I just offer someone a little bit more? How can I offer equity? And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, man, just be simple. Just
Yeah.
just keep it simple. Offer your interest rate. And because another thing, and as well, when you get a rental property, you realize the benefits of depreciation and holding longer term appreciation, and so how do you share that tax benefit with your investors? Um, and it's something I've been kind of exploring, but haven't really come. And we could probably use the trust to do
Mm,
that. But right
yeah.
now, it costs money to have a trustee and put a property in trust and everything. So putting rental properties in trust just isn't appealing to me now. But I think over time, I'd be, open to figuring out, for some of those investors that are like, well, shoot, I'm a high, money earner now. I would rather than your 10%, I'd rather have 5%, but get 50K in depreciation. How can you help me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
No, yeah, we haven't really looked into that at all, frankly.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. So what's your current acquisition strategy for these properties?
Um, so I have a buy box. Um, I have an acquisitions guy, and I also, so a lot of wholesalers. I network with a lot of wholesalers. my market is Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, South Carolina, kind of up the 85 corridor. I've done some deals recently up in North Carolina, and then I have rental properties all over the place. But as far as what my buy box is, um, so very specific. I'm a numbers guy, so very
Yeah.
very specific, and I try to adhere to a minimum. And this is right. This is all projections. This is all pro forma. So based on comparable sales, I kind of back out what a full renovation would be, less all costs to do the renovation, and then uh, I, and I'll be 100% open about it. I try not to profit less than 25K and 15% on each of my deals. Now, as a result of that, I've also wound up with $0. I haven't lost money on a deal yet. I've lost time, um, which which those were all lessons learned, and I'm glad I actually had those deals. But I went into those deals thinking, "Hey, I'm going to make 25K," and I wound up with zero, right? And
Mm,
I made my lenders whole, and so that's a win, and you learn a lot along the way. But at those thresholds, I try to meet the 25K minimum projected profit and 15% return on investment.
yeah.
And if I can meet both of those in my acquisition, I would say that's my acquisition strategy. And I'm a risk guy. My background is a risk world. Um, and numbers. I like to be on spreadsheets for a while. Uh, and and so um, I do a lot of underwriting and analysis to project, um, you know, 25K and 15% and or 15%. And obviously that threshold changes a little bit. The lower you get, like, so if you're buying a 50K project, 100K renovation and a 250 list price, different than if you're buying a 400K property,
Yeah.
um, you know, 200K renovation and 800K list price. That changes because it's harder to make that 15% on a 200K profit,
Yeah.
um, if you're bringing that amount of capital. So, um, but I do like to do some risk sensitivity analysis, like what is the probability that I'll lose money, and then what is the probability of the upside.
Hmm.
I don't do it like legit probability. I don't sit here and do statistics, but
Okay.
I I like to say like the probability of losing money is far less than my probability of the upside. And
Yeah.
if nothing else, I'll come out the back end with that 25K and or 15%.
Yeah. So you buy from some wholesalers and then you do some marketing for your acquisitions guy and he goes on
Yep.
appointments, or how do you guys run that?
Yeah. So he interacts with wholesalers as well, and then we also do SMS marketing. I at some point I have done all the things, every single type of marketing.
Yeah.
Um, I will probably lean into pay per click SEO marketing again soon. Um, we've had a lot of trouble with like launch control and getting that application to be consistently good, and not even just like SMS marketing, but like just seems like things change and change and change. And so uh, I don't know that we're going to move away from and that's not even launch control's fault. I actually love launch control as the service. It's just now you have to have a website, or you have to have um, there's just all this, I think, probably things going on in different states with how you can send texts and what the conditions and rules are for sending text. So it's not launch control itself. It's like how the launch control service can get through to the other end, and then
Hmm.
how the providers are starting to protect the other end. Um, I personally will never go send text messages myself. It's just not something I enjoy doing. I really enjoy talking to sellers and I really enjoy talking to buyers. But as far as like the marketing piece, I'd prefer to pay someone that's way better at it than me to do that. Um, and my acquisitions guy, is about as is about as savvy, and he's kind of got the golden tongue sort of thing. He's like the got the gift of gab, and he's just really good at what he does, and he's just fun to work with.
Yeah.
So
How
I only
did
got one.
you how did you find and train that guy? That's always a big question for people.
Didn't have to train him. We found him
Okay.
by he shared an office with when I had a partnership. There was four partners, and we found him when we had purchased a property in South Carolina, and the contractor that we used to renovate it shared an office with my acquisitions guy. And he's not in house, so I pay him a flat fee, and um, and then I also pay him for marketing.
Got it. Got it. So he's kind of like independent contractor and he does
Yeah.
other stuff or
Yep, he brings me deals, and we have a really good relationship, um, and again, he's fun to work with, and uh, that's important to me as anything.
yeah, gotcha. And then what's your plan for call it the rest of this year?
Uh, I just lost my integrator. Um, I When she was on board, we were really starting um, to ramp up. Um, Going into this year, I thought I'd probably do like one a month, one deal a month, and we're on track to probably double that.
Nice.
And and so probably for the rest of this year, I'd like to focus on. Um, I think we talked previously, Mike, about simplifying.
Yeah.
And so I've gone from a world of very, very complex, and I say simplifying, and then I'm sitting here telling you about how I buy through land trusts,
Yeah.
subject to owner finance, and how complex that all sounds. But to me, it's not complex because I've done it now several times, and and actually more than several times, probably upward of 30 to 40 times with partners. Um, but the rest of this year, I think I'd like um, to nail down what I want to do for marketing, and I want to continue the amount of flips, probably 1 to 2 a month as a goal. I don't have very specific goals. Like when I was in the military, I had all these goals, and you write them down, you spell them out, um, and I have things in mind I want to do, but I would rather focus on the operations, the process and procedure stuff, and create a foundation to be able to scale than to try to meet a try to hit 50 properties this year, try to hit, 1 million in sales this year. I don't reach for goals. I think I reach to continuously iterate and improve what we're doing on the marketing, acquisitions, dispositions, and sales. So my goal is probably just to get more refined and better at what we're doing and make it bread and butter, and
Mhm.
also to replace my integrator, who is quite irreplaceable in my opinion. But uh, but we'll find someone, and maybe even look to get a couple more people on board in house.
Mhm.
That it would be nice to. So I live in Florida and Georgia, um, and so boots on ground I don't have, other than my acquisitions guy, he's in country there in South Carolina. And so probably get someone on the disposition side, like a project management type, or someone that can manage the properties, and also maybe property manage to some degree, uh, and then just focus on adapting. Marketing is a moving target, so adapting my marketing
Mhm.
and continue to buy 1 to 2 a month. Probably try to pick up a rental property here or there, um, and kind of just systematize and just become good at what we do.
Yeah. Um That brings up an interesting thing, right? So you are flipping properties, but you are nowhere near the location that you're flipping properties, which, um, I mean, some people would say, how is that possible, right? So I'm curious, like, how do you structure that to allow you to flip remotely?
Um, so I'll lead with I think it's better that I can't see the properties that are being flipped, that I can't just easily get in a car and go to the projects.
Yeah.
Um, because, if you're there, you can get intimately involved with that and emotionally involved to some degree. Like, you know, this little piece of flooring isn't level. And so I try to separate myself um, from, and I go to South Carolina probably twice a month. So
Hmm.
I'll go up there and I just like to see the projects. It's, you can get video and pictures for content and put that out on the socials. So I do. And the reason I go up there is less about my projects and more about, um, let's hang out with the property managers, the contractors, the acquisition guys, the agents that we work with. And that's just what we do. And I like to go up and gather all of those people, wholesalers, everyone at one little, really fun location and just hang out. And so to answer your question specifically, though, it's you got to rely on your team
Hmm.
and you got to have a good team and you got to trust your team to do that.
Did you build that team remotely, or were you in South Carolina when you built that team?
So I was in Athens, Georgia for a year. Um, and then I was in South Carolina for like 3 to 4 months.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the relationships were built when I was in a partnership and we all still kind of have that that same network of people in South Carolina, and so it was built remotely. But we also went to South Carolina. I lived in South Carolina for like 3 months in a furnished residence, and made those relationships. And then I go back at least once a month, if it's not twice a month, when I can.
Yeah. And then, are there any things you do to just manage that construction remotely? I mean, how are you making sure that things are moving along and all that good stuff?
Uh, when you have the right contractor, it doesn't take a whole lot. Uh, it doesn't take a whole. So my new contractor can do projects in 3 weeks. So you go from you know this not and I don't buy dilapidated houses all the time. It's occasional. I buy houses that are they're 15, 20 years without rehab renovation, and they need either a sprucing up or they need you know small change in floor plan, open it up, kitchen to the living room, and so when you have the contractor that can do projects in 3 to 4 weeks, and in some cases 2 months, 2 to 3 months, um, then we rely on photos and videos, and then I'm there, right? I go there and I'll check on all the properties and all the projects, um, and so and then again relying on and trusting your team. You got to trust your contractor to do the right thing, um, and that he's really serving as the project manager on your
Mm,
behalf. So you just got to trust them and trust but verify a lot of times too.
sure.
And how I've gained that trust is to be open with my communication. If after a project is done, an inspection happens, and we have all sorts of issues, and that issue becomes something that's come up several times. I'll just I'll just tough love. I'll just be like, look, and we need to focus on this because it's bit us now on a couple properties, and um, you know we need to budget for in the beginning, and we need to do it right. And whoever that is that's doing the job, they need to do it right the first time because it's costing you and it's costing us. So I'm very open, and I feel like if you have enough invitation challenge with your relationships, this is personal and business, professional relationships, it really becomes a thriving relationship.
Yeah. You say invitation challenge? I've never heard that term
Yeah,
before.
be inviting, definitely be inviting, and be amenable. Uh, you know, invitation. I kind of learned it in a little, um, kind of like a mini mastermind that I did with a couple of my partners from a few years back. But just be open to feedback,
Hmm.
and be inviting. Just and that's a very, I guess, broad word to say. You know, uh, uh, well, I don't know really know how to explain that word, but invite
Yeah.
feedback, and then also be willing to challenge,
Hmm.
um, and be willing to have that, that really those really hard conversations, and if you do that, that allows you to, um, I think, build a deeper level understanding of each other, and ultimately lead to a more trusted and trusting relationship.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Well, we're getting close to the end here, and there is always two questions I like
And
to
that went
ask.
fast.
I know, dude, we're almost an hour in. It's wild. Um, First question I always ask, it's a little bit of a fun one, which is what is the craziest or most uncomfortable situation you've ever experienced in a real estate deal?
Craziest, most. So I guess there's like a positive and a negative way to view this question.
Yeah.
Most uncomfortable is probably when, and you learn over time. Uh, Real estate is litigious, so like at some point, it is possible that when you are flipping properties and something can happen at all of these real properties that you have or own. And so being threatened with a lawsuit is probably the most uncomfortable I've been. Um, that story is a little bit longer, and a little bit, we could do probably a whole episode on that alone. Um, but since then, something that you feared would happen all along in being, having, being served, you know, once you've been through it, you learn that there's so many ways to work things out, um, with whoever is suing you, whether or not that's, relying on insurance, or settling, or whatever. And so you begin to understand that the legal world has, they definitely have their bounds, but they also have a lot of wiggle room in how you can handle things. And in a lot of those cases, when you do catch that lawsuit, there's just ways to work things out that you shouldn't fear that, because you know someone people can sue for anything. If someone steps on a knife or falls off of one of your roofs, and you catch a lawsuit, and that's not what happened, by the way, but uh, um, it's possible, it's possible. And
Yeah.
so you do the best you can with that scenario. You do the best you can with, how you're structured to protect your equities and your interests. I use, different entities and different states, and frankly trusts, to
Hmm.
protect, anonymity and asset protection. So and that doesn't come overnight. You have to learn a lot about it and structure, how you will, just to protect, yourself and your assets. But that's probably the most uncomfortable I've been.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it. Uh,
Yeah.
Friend of mine told me once, he's like, you know, you're a real business owner when you get sued the first time.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been fortunate that it hasn't happened yet, but I'm sure
Yeah.
one point or another, right? Enough
Yep.
transactions, enough volume. It's
Yep.
part of it.
Yep.
Yeah. So second question for maybe the people who are a little bit newer watching the show, which is if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice when you were looking for your first deal, knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Um, Keep it simple, stupid. Um, so there are it's very easy to get. There are so many opportunities. Once you do one, and once you're like doing this full time, you can do all types of asset classes in real estate, and you can do it all sorts of different ways. Um, so I say simplicity, like, um, so I think it's there's benefit to partnering. Right now that I'm doing deals myself, um, I feel like it's very simple, and I've pared down to just doing flips and either renting or selling owner finance. Um, I feel like there is the reason to partner is to either is for growth. And my previous partner and I had this conversation recently. Is either for growth and to push through um, uh, that next phase in your real estate journey, or partner with someone that has a completely different set of skills and capabilities that you have that can probably, I would say, multiple of 10 fold what you can do. um, Not even just double. I would say at least 5 to 10 what improve your business. Um, uh, so from a partnership perspective, simplifying, and if you do partner, I'd say pare down to at least just start with two and see how that goes. And then simplifying on the asset class. The moment I started to niche is the moment I started to not be super confused at everything that was going on and how to track it and how to, avoid the bookkeeper on what the heck happened with this, and so just keeping things simple from a partnership and a niche perspective. So if you're going to go do storage units, then go do storage units, or multifamily, go do multifamily. Don't try to be doing sub two owner finance using land trust and multifamily, because I've done that, and it's all good. Actually, I'll lean back into a lot of those other asset classes at some point, but I really feel like now that I've niched down and I've simplified, um, and uh, I just feel like um, I've uh, I've become a lot more intimately involved with how I run my business rather than being like a little bit out of control
Yeah.
and have too many balls juggling at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good piece of advice. Keep it
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah. Yeah. So I probably went a little, like, expanded on that a little bit more than you wanted,
No, I think it
but
was great. It's actually we pick a slogan saying for the quarter, right? And I've got it right here on my computer. And our saying for the quarter is "Do simple better."
yep.
So we're on the same wavelength. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So that's it.
so if people want to reach out to you after the show, maybe they have questions, or maybe there's some wholesalers in kind of the Greenville area, how can they go about doing that?
I can provide you with my contact information. I so Hunter Altman, at Hunter Altman on Instagram, Hunter Altman on Facebook. My investments page is the same on Facebook and Instagram, which is Hunter Investments, Hunter Investment Homes, at Hunter Investment Homes. Email hunter at highhomesllc.com. And I'm not going to give you my phone number, but I'm just kidding. But yeah, you can contact me those ways. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram. And and yeah, welcome to follow along anytime. I We get excited about what we are able to put out there. Obviously, we're in a very photogenic business, and we're novices at putting content out, but it's fun for us. And so I feel like as long as we're just putting things out there, even if they don't look perfect, they don't look good. I don't have a great logo. I'm not great at that stuff. I'm not super the creative mind, and like aesthetically, I don't create aesthetically pleasing stuff, but but as long as you're putting it out and getting people excited about it, I feel like that's what we want to do. And so any of those ways, Instagram, Facebook, my email, hunter at highhomesllc.com.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, this was great. Thank you for being on the show.
All right, Mike. Thanks a lot. Appreciate